Hello and welcome to Rock Paper Shotgun. This is Matthew, and today we're taking a quick look at Mortal Shell, an action RPG in the Dark Souls vein from developers called Symmetry. Now this preview build is actually being released tomorrow as a beta for selected players, and more on that at the end. So I thought I'd whip through what I picked up from a couple of hours playing it. Normally we'd do these videos as a little Q&A, but my fellow vidbud Cullum is away, so I'm going to interview myself. So Matthew, first of all, thanks for joining us. No worries. So, Mortal Shell has been described by the team as a love letter to the Souls-like, a term that irks some people as it's become quite overused shorthand. Is it valid here? Yeah, it's not an unreasonable usage of the term, actually. Both mechanically and aesthetically, I think you can see that this is drawing a lot of inspiration from Dark Souls and from Software's games in general. Visually, it's got this dark fantasy aesthetic, very oppressive atmosphere, everything's covered in fog. We've got this medieval armour, it's all sort of tarnished steel. Feels like a world in decay, populated by gribbly meat monsters and sort of rather desperate bandit camps. None of it's really explained. It has that sort of ambiguity where you're just meant to kind of piece it all together. Likewise, there's no clear objective given to you. There's no mini-map, there's no obvious goal. You're just dumped in this area and left to explore. I will say, it's not the biggest area for the purposes of the demo. They've actually trimmed it down. It's the opening area of Fulgrim, and in the final game it will push out in a lot of directions. You can see playing the demo that there are beginnings of routes to new areas, but they are kind of cut off with artificial blockages. But it leans really heavily into that ambiguity that a lot of people like about Dark Souls. One extra weird example of it here is that items actually have to be used to work out what they do. Like, they're not given item descriptions until you shove them in your gob or rub them on your skin or whatever it is that they do with them, which does lead to the quite weird moment where you have to eat a baguette to know what it is. Oh man, imagine not knowing what a baguette is. Well, I thought of it more as imagine getting to discover a baguette for the first time. What a treat! As long as it's not a prêt-à-manger artisan baguette which will shatter your teeth. Actually, that would make a good weapon in a Dark Souls game, but let's ignore that. And finally, you have the combat, which is very methodical and merciless. You know, if it goes wrong in a big way. It's all about managing very big wind-up animations, trying to land those hits. It feels very, very familiar under the fingers if you've played Dark Souls. That kind of weight, committing to a hit, that kind of panic when you realise you've bodged the timing and then you're just wiped out in an instant. But there's more to the combat than just that, am I right? Yeah, so what makes combat unique hinges on the title of the game, the Mortal Shell. Technically, you aren't playing as these knights you've seen. You are, in fact, this guy who looks a little bit like Ralph Fiennes' Voldemort from the Harry Potter films in his face, that kind of weird, noseless abomination. In this form, you're incredibly weak. If you take a single hit, you die. He does have a natural defense, which is actually another part of the title, the Shell, in that he can harden his outer body into this sort of carapace that blocks attacks and sends enemies reeling when they connect. This is really interesting as it's this sort of organic parry that you can activate at any time, so you can actually wind up an attack, harden, let the enemy attack you and recoil, and then unharden to finish the attack animation. So you can basically pause an attack to use it a second later. That sounds incredibly powerful, and as I got into the demo, I found that was the kind of key to unlocking the combat. You can't spam it because there's quite a long cooldown on harden, though again, you can improve that, which I'll talk about in a second. On top of that, you've also got a traditional parry using this item on your back, which is called the Tarnished Seal. This will parry any weak attacks. If there's an attack coming your way that it can't parry, it basically lights up red to warn you that you might want to harden instead. And it feels at this early stage that the kind of combat revolves around these two different kind of defenses and parries, so you can basically harden to absorb the hit and then carry on fighting, or you can risk a more direct parry to try and deflect the attack. And if you have resolve, which are these little orange bars down here, and they generate through landing attacks, if you have that energy and then you parry, you can also do a sort of instant kill riposte or a high damage riposte for stronger characters, which gets you some health back. I actually found that the regular parry was best used when you specifically wanted to do one of these counter attacks. If you don't have the energy to do one, it feels a little underpowered because the kind of recoil animation pushes enemies back quite far and they recover quite quickly, so you don't necessarily have the time to actually land any attacks after that parry, where with the hardened you can obviously freeze an attack mid-flow and get back into it pretty quickly. But a big part of the fun is working out where to use the two of them. You know, when enemies have these unblockable attacks that flare up the tarnished seal, you know, you can hit hardened and they'll bounce off. These sort of lizard men, for example, will kind of pounce on you and eat your face. But if you use hardened, they'll basically jump on and their teeth will just bounce off your stone head, which is pretty impressive. I will say hardened feels very, very powerful when you get it right. The demo actually ends with a big boss fight against this thing called the Enslaved Grisha, and the first couple of times I encountered it, it was just whomping me, just wiping the floor with me. I couldn't do anything. You know, I was trying to parry, I was trying to dodge. It's incredibly fast, it's incredibly powerful, and I was thinking, oh well, this is it, I'm not going to be able to finish this demo. But actually, once I learned to start hardening, I could absorb so many attacks, and then I'm right up there in its grill to just start laying into it, and I actually found it quite a pushover once I got into that rhythm. Okay, so if you've got this harder outer shell, what about the shells that you possess? Can you tell us about those? Currently there are going to be 4 in the game, and you've got to basically think of them as character classes. You find one right at the start, which is called Haros the Vessel, though you don't actually know that. One of the quirks of the game is you have to learn about your character before you can unlock their abilities, and you do this by finding a character called Sister Janessa, and you have to pay her a couple of currencies. Very quickly on the currencies, you have Tar, which is quite like Dark Souls, and you have Glimpses, which I want to say are like Dark Souls humanity. They don't seem as advanced. Like, I don't think your combat abilities and your power are tied to your glimpse level, for example, but they're basically a more elite currency that are used for more precious things like leveling up. You can also walk back to Sesta Janessa using glimpses as well. But the short version is I only know he's called Haros the Vessel because I found the sister and then I upgraded him and so on. His deal is that he's got big health, short stamina, and quite a few bars of resolve, so he can actually save up those attacks for ripostes. From what I can tell in the demo, his entire deal is built around the kind of hardened state and the benefits of hardened state. So once you've learnt his name, you can also unlock accretions for him. They're just basically skills and upgrades. And his particular skill tree includes things like his hardened state will recuperate faster. For a short time after hardening, any enemies he kills will drop additional glimpses, and those glimpses can heal you a bit. So it becomes this sort of virtuous cycle of blocking with the hardened, getting more glimpses because you blocked with the hardened, and then healing yourself with those glimpses. I didn't play a huge amount of him because I actually much preferred the second shell that I found, who's this guy called Tiao, the Acolyte. This guy has big stamina, but he's very short on health and has fewer resolve bars. So he's not as great at the ripostes and the big special move that use the resolve bar. But that stamina bar is really, really useful, especially paired with this hammer and chisel weapon, which I found, which was a lot faster than the sword. I was landing loads of attacks. It can also have a chance of poisoning enemies. I think that's specific to the hammer and chisel. Like I say, you know, a lot of the game is about unpicking things and working out what they do, but I seemed to be poisoning people with that weapon set. Poison is actually at the heart of this particular character. You can upgrade him so that you generate poisons when you do the riposte after a parry. You can also set him to heal from poisons, which made the second half of this demo an absolute pushover, because you start off in this swamp area, then you move down to the catacombs, and down here you've got lizard men who have poisonous claws. There's also these terrifying kind of men full of swords, and they'll pull the swords out of their bodies to sort of chop you up, which is pretty rough as it goes. At one point, one of them even threw a sword and it went through my head, which looked pretty severe. But once you've whittled down their health, they'll also trigger this kind of suicide attack where they set off this huge big bubble of poison. It's quite a severe poison. It killed me a lot of times until I got this upgrade that poison heals me. And then basically this whole dungeon became just a healing party for Tiao. You know, I was just walking around pumping myself up on all the poisons, which meant the second half of the demo just became a lot easier. You know, I was able to make much faster progress. I was finding the kind of raw materials needed to upgrade the weapons. I could upgrade the hammer and chisel quite a few times, so it's super powerful, which then probably helped me with the boss battle, as I mentioned earlier. Once I'd got my head around the hardened thing, I could really lay into him because those weapons were suitably powerful. Now, I don't know if this reflects item placement in the final game. I imagine things have been placed the way they've been placed to make the demo kind of move along to give you an idea of the kind of power development. But yeah, I really like this character, and I really liked the differences between them. You really felt that stamina change, for example. You know, you could just jump in and whittle away on enemies in a way that Harros couldn't. So with these shells, is it a case of once you're in, and you can just make yourself at home? Not really. Once you run out of health, you're knocked out of your shell and you're in your vulnerable state. As I say, you can only take one hit when you're in this particular body, but you can then get back into your body as long as you don't get attacked beforehand, or you can leg it. I don't know why you'd leg it. Like, if you're in the body, you've obviously got a lot more health. If you climb back into the body, if you get knocked out a second time, it is game over, or rather you're dropped back to the start. In true Dark Souls fashion, you then have one life to get back to your body and to reclaim that shell and get the tar and glimpses it was carrying at the time. And very quickly, what about the actual world itself? Does it have that kind of classic Dark Souls structure? Is it full of interesting burrows and strange little passages leading off? I can see that it will be. Like I said earlier, like the demo has been kind of trimmed in certain places, and there are artificial blockages put in to stop you from getting out of this little demo area. What's here is quite linear. I've seen in other interviews them say that this is a game built by a relatively small indie studio. I think there's 15 of them, so they're looking at something which is quite kind of condensed. I think they've thrown around like a 20-hour playtime for the game. You can actually get from the start to the boss, which is the end of the demo, in probably like a minute sprint. It's not a big play area that you're exploring, but that it took me 2 hours kind of unpicking it. You know, speaks to the rhythm of these particular games. I always find Souls-like games kind of most interesting right at the start, where you don't know how they work and you don't know the tricks and you're trying to kind of feel your way through it, basically trying to see what kind of game is this going to be. And so here I feel the demo shows off lots of interesting mechanics without just giving up all the world secrets. They've actually stripped it of story specifics, so there's not any context for what you're doing really. But even here I found some things to amuse myself. There's a cat you can stroke, that was quite good. I found this lute that I could play. I think it annoys enemies, and the more you play it, the better you seem to get. So you start off and it's an absolute racket, but by the end you're basically playing hardest difficulty Guitar Hero on it. There was a cave with a frogman who I killed. He was a named character, so I'm assuming he was some kind of sub-boss, but I kind of rinsed him, so that was nice. But generally I was really impressed with this. I think it looks really nice. I love the kind of tone and atmosphere. I think the harden and parry system play really nicely together. I love the idea of the shells. They really do feel distinct. You know, if you get into the beta, make sure you give both of them a go, and you'll see that they've got a very different vibe. So you mentioned the beta there. How do people actually get into that? Well, I think they're giving out codes through their social media, so I'll pop some links in the description. They're encouraging people to join their Discord, for example, so that's probably the way to go. Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about this one. When they showed it at the PC Gaming Show, I thought the demo felt a little flat. Once I actually got into it and tried out some of its ideas for myself, it really began to click. There's no sign of From Software's next thing, the Elden Ring, not yet anyway. So, you know, this could be quite a nice little stopgap. Well, thank you for talking through it, me. That's fine, thank you, also me. We will try and get more about Mortal Shell on the channel in the next few months. Like he said, like I said, this one is looking pretty nice, and we definitely want to cover it a lot more. So if you enjoyed this video, do subscribe for more Mortal Shell, and why not check out some of our other recent previews. We've taken a little look at Outriders, that's got 2 voices, not just one, and we've done a little preview of the Games of the Month. You should check that out too. Thanks for watching Rock Paper Shotgun, and we will hopefully see you again soon. Bye for now.